Okay, here we go.
We are live.
We are live. So, ladies and gentlemen, our guest today is someone who has been living and breathing wild foods for well over a decade. She's the force behind the Wild Food Girl and has been foraging, teaching, and writing about wild foods for a very long time. Runs the Wild Food Girl online school, leads plant walks across Colorado, and is currently writing a book on edible plants, mentored by legends like Sam Thayer himself. She's here to share her deep knowledge and passion for living off the land. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Erica Davis. Yay! Hey, Erica, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Poldi?
Doing great. Doing great. We're super pumped to have you here today. We've been, I've been following you for a very long time, and you've been putting out so much good info over the year. And I've actually attended some of your classes now too, which I'm hoping to get into, finding the time to do more of them. I did the lamb's quarter processing one last, and then I think before that was biscuit roots when we were there live. So those are all really, really great classes for sure. So one real quick, we already have one, or we already have four live viewers, but Mike Mason is back.
Hi,
Hi, Mike. Ask your questions in the chat, guys. We'll try to get to them as much as possible. But to start out, Erica, how did you become Wild Food Girl? What really sparked your first deep dive into foraging and kind of sharing wild food stories?
Sure. Well, I honestly have been interested in I've been interested in foraging since I was a kid, like elementary school. My uncle had Yule Gibbons' book, Stalking the Wild Asparagus, and he would take me out and we would try things. And as kids, we think that food comes from the grocery store, right? I mean, if we're lucky, we think it comes from the garden. But I was just so fascinated that you could eat the things that were growing in wild spaces. So, when I later on, this obsession never kind of ended. Like I continued in high school and I was kind of an oddball. I mean, nobody else was doing that. They thought I was weird, and trying to feed people things. But when I moved to Colorado in 2008, I kind of dived back into it. And I guess the rest is history. Well, you did ask, how I got into sharing the stories too. So my husband is a web designer. And I'm also a writer. So, back in like 2009, 2010, he set me up with a blog and, 50 wild food posts later, I realized this is what I want to write about. So that's
awesome.
That's kind of how I did it. Yeah.
That's sweet. And how long have you been actually doing it, like now foraging? Since you're a kid then, basically?
Yeah, since I was a kid. I'm 50 years young. So, I was probably like 10 when I started. Wow. And I didn't know a lot back then, but
it's so valuable to have that, be able to get into that as a kid and then really have those experiences from that young age and then be able to keep building on it. It's incredible. I haven't met many people who've been doing it that long, so I think you might be the longest, honestly. I know our buddy Clay Bowers, he's been doing it, I think, going for like 20 years now.
Yeah, I think about 20.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's so cool.
Okay.
Well, one plant that I personally just can't stop talking about is dandelions. And I think it's such a great wild edible plant for both beginners and even advanced foragers alike. Like for me, I'm really trying to learn how to use the dandelion's full food potential. So I love hearing about unique ways to use dandelions in the kitchen. And, just from looking up dandelion online, one of your articles always pops up, and that's your dandelion soup recipe. And I think it's probably become a staple for a lot of foragers out there. So I'm curious, what inspired the original dish and how do you make it?
Well, I have to say, I'm awfully tickled that you said that. That's awesome. I do a lot of searching abroad for traditional uses of plants, especially if they're either non-native or they're found in other areas of the world. So, because I figure if the Italians love dandelions, which they do, they know how to cook with them because they're not that easy to cook with. But this particular recipe came from my father-in-law's late wife, who is Italian. She grew up in Philadelphia in her grandparents would go out in the fields and collect dandelions every spring, and they would make this soup, which I insisted she tell me how you make it. So they call it manest. And I've since met other people who know manest and get excited about it. But yeah, basically it's like served as an appetizer. So basically all you do is you cook a pot of veggie soup with a nice broth, and then separately you boil your chopped dandelions just for a couple minutes, pull them out when they're tender. But some of the bitterness ends up in the broth, but you're just using the dandelions. So then you plate the dandelions with the soup, and then Italian sausage, a nice cheese like pecorino. And yeah, we love it in my house. And then, I also now am mostly vegan. So we do a vegan version without the meat and with kind of a fake cheese. Yeah.
I love that. I'm half Italian, so anytime I hear about an Italian recipe, I'm all about it.
Yep.
I bet I should ask my Nonna, my Italian grandma, if she has heard. I'm sure she's heard and even probably made that recipe in some other form. And that's really cool.
So
I'm half Italian. Oh, sorry.
You're half Italian too?
I'm half Italian too, but my mom didn't have
Italian high five.
Yeah, high five. My mom didn't keep a lot of the culinary traditions, so I like learning them. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, so if someone's never cooked with dandelions before, what should they be doing to help make the dish taste good?
Yeah, well, in this case, that blanch or brief boil and discarding the water does mellow the flavor a little bit. Of course, I end up drinking that water as dandelion tea anyway, and then sweetener goes a long way. But yeah, I just think also, combining them with other ingredients. I'll make a shredded carrot raisin salad with finely chopped dandelions in it. And again, the carrots and the raisins kind of balance that bitterness, because there is bitterness, and you have to like a degree of bitterness, just like, endive has bitterness to it. Chicory has bitterness to it. But I think it can still make a very palatable and nutritious food.
Have you noticed that if you're taking the roots, for example, of dandelion, that if you skin them, that it's less bitter? Have you experimented with that at all?
It's funny. I haven't experimented with that. And today I was roasting dandelion roots to make coffee, and I have it on my list to try raw dandelion roots, because I usually cook them if I find young dandelions. I should say first year dandelions with big roots. I'll roast them and eat them as a vegetable, but I haven't tried peeling them. So have you done that?
Yeah, well, I noticed it with salsify, which is, a similar plant. So I've been wanting to try it with the dandelions. And then one thing I like to do with dandelions, at least, is get them in the shade. It seems like they grow bigger plants and just they're less bitter in the shade if I want the leaves, Yeah.
I think also too, just foraging on them early in the season when there aren't many flowers at all, when they've just popped up. And I was curious if you get in Montana the ginormous dandelions that we get in the Colorado high country. I mean, I can fill a bag with one rosette of dandelion. Or, the other day I found a single dandelion that had 147 flower stalks on it.
Oh,
I know. I counted them.
That's crazy.
I know. Do you get those huge ones?
So not like that.
Yeah,
I mean, that seems like an extreme case, but I think you posted on Instagram a few weeks back. You were riding your bike and you found a big one. So I do notice dandelions that are a lot bigger in the high country around creeks than like down here more in the in the plains country or like around rivers even. So for whatever reason, in the shade and creeks they get huge.
Yeah, and I think you're right, about the less bitter in the shade. That makes a lot of sense. So do you live in the plains?
We live
Ish.
we live kind of more in like the kind of the basin, and
okay.
We're not like right in the mountains, but it's only like about a half an hour drive, and we're into like foothills and then get into the mountain.
30 minutes we're in the plains with
rattlesnakes.
Yeah,
we're kind of like right in the middle
of both
of everything.
Yeah,
that's nice.
It is nice. So I'd like to pivot a little bit into another amazing wild food edible, and one plant I think a lot of people are hyped about right now are the huckleberries, right? And out west, there's like a long history and culture around huckleberry foraging, maybe more so than any other plant, at least in the like zeitgeist of culture. That for people who don't forage, that's what I hear them talk about the most. So I figured it'd be a great topic to kind of discuss this time of the year. And, it is huckleberry season right now for us, at least. I don't know how it is for you. Are you getting them into them right now too?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, now is the time really. So, but the word huckleberry kind of gets thrown around a lot in the foraging circles. But depending on like kind of where you are, it seems to mean different things. Can you kind of break down like how the term is used in different parts of the country and why there's really so much confusion around the name?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. And it might take me a second to get to your question, but just to start out, where I live in high country Colorado, the closest thing that we have to a huckleberry are three low growing species of vaccinium. They get to about calf height. So, they're basically ground cover plants, and you have to look under the foliage to find them. So these, I could get into what the different species are. But some people also call them whortleberries or bilberries or grouseberries. And those three uh, are different than the really famous huckleberry of the Northwest, which I look forward to foraging in quantity one day. I've met that plant once, and I don't know, what do you call it? I mean, I've read that it's called black huckleberry, big huckleberry, thin leaf huckleberry, but it's Vaccinium membranaceum.
Yeah, I just consider that one the huckleberry, and the other ones I call,
Yeah.
uh, you call them, I think, whortleberries. So I call them whortleberries. And actually, I just showed them to a friend of mine for the first time who takes his kid out mushroom foraging. And he told me that last week, all she wanted to do was get the grouse whortleberries. And she ended up, she calls them worth it berries now.
Worth it berries.
Worth it
Yeah.
berries because they're so
Worth
good.
it. Oh, that's very cute. Yeah, I mean, we don't get that taller huckleberry here. And so, when I was first learning the three low species in my area, I read about them in a book called Best Tasting Plants of Colorado and the Rockies by Cattell Bob Seebeck. And his entry is titled Huckleberry. And
Okay.
so, I started calling all three of them huckleberries. And they're small, but they're so good. And so I'm excited. I'm writing about them on Facebook, and inevitably somebody jumps down my throat. Those are not huckleberries. Those are whortleberries. Those are grouseberries. Um, and maybe it's because of Cattell Bob that people in Colorado sometimes call those little ones huckleberries. Maybe it's his doing. I don't know, but I think it's, the fact is they are actually a species of huckleberry or blueberry. They're all in the genus Vaccinium out west. They all have the little round stamp at the end of the berry. And so there are a lot of similarities, but, I think it's important to remember that these are just common names. Like there
Yeah.
isn't scientific validity to a common name. And common names, like you mentioned, can vary by region. For example, the brown red capped porcini that everybody loves in the Rockies used to be called Boletus edulis. Now it's called Boletus rubriceps, and a bunch of people have started calling it rubies because
I like
calling them
that.
rubies, because
That's
Yeah,
cool.
that is good.
rubriceps. But nobody's jumping down their throat. Oh, that's not a ruby.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something about huckleberries engenders this like fierce, uh, you know,
Protectiveness.
I know. And but to finally get to your question, which is what about the different regions of the country? So, if you're in the Northwest, most people are going to consider that famous huckleberry to be the huckleberry. But if you're in the East, there's a whole genus of plants in Gay-Lussacia that people refer to as huckleberries, and then they refer to the vacciniums as blueberries. So there's definitely some difference, across the country. And Sam Thayer has a really good discussion of this in Nature's Garden. He argues that the name huckleberry and whortleberry likely evolved from the same word.
Mm,
They had,
yeah.
So yeah,
I
yeah, go ahead.
I could see that happening. It's kind of interesting how the common names then eventually like get muddled or you. It's I always love how Sam tries to trace them back. Throughout history, like why did they get that common name? And
Mm-hmm.
that's like a whole detective work of itself. To kind of figure that out.
I know, and I thought that was a really good essay that he wrote. There's also something I read. Are you familiar with Abe Lloyd's website? It's called Wild Harvests, and he's in the Pacific Northwest. He's in Oregon, but
I probably stumbled upon it before, but not, not familiar as I am with your website, for example, or Forage Colorado, Orion, Orion Aeon. He does great stuff too.
well, Abe has a very funny thing on his website, which he wrote his own key, but the key is not a botanical key. It's a key to the English folk taxonomy of vacciniums. And so he concludes that blueberries on tall bushes are blueberries, blueberries on short bushes are bilberries, and red to blackberries are huckleberries or whortleberries, which
Interesting.
I love it, but it doesn't even stand up in Colorado where we're calling everything huckleberries.
Yeah, yeah. I think here too. I mean, most people will call everything huckleberries, but
Yeah.
it is, I think the most interesting part to this discussion to me always is that they are all kind of blueberries at the end of the day. Like the huckleberry here is much more like the blueberry they'll get
Mm-hmm.
in Michigan and than it is that what they actually call huckleberry over there. And I love
Definitely.
that about
Yeah,
it.
I think like a blueberry, a store-bought blueberry might be considered more straightforward sweet generally, whereas the huckleberry a little more acid sweet, and even
Yeah.
those little
Mm-hmm.
whortleberries. But I do want to say, because I do think it's funny to fight about it, to fight about common names, and I have had some people pretty angry at me for calling those little ones huckleberries, and other people are getting this too. So I just want to say to the people who are listening, if that happens to you, someone gets mad at you for calling a whortleberry a huckleberry, you know, you don't have to turn in your forager badge. Just, smile politely and pass the bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell them to help you pick, and you're already in your spot. So
Yeah, they can
Yeah.
show you what a huckleberry is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, what kind of habitats or like ecological clues are you looking for when you're scouting for new huckleberry patches, specifically out west?
Yeah, so and I can really only speak to these three low-growing species that are so common in the southern Rockies, and they do extend, west as you have them as well. But the low ones where I live are pretty much everywhere, from the middle elevations to about tree line. They grow in spruce and they grow in fir, they grow in aspen, they grow in lodgepoles. They make really extensive carpets, across the whole ground where I live. And so for me, it's less about scouting for new patches, but just keeping an eye out to see what's going to be fruitful this year, because it'll vary from year to year. And I'm usually finding them and scouting them when I'm looking for mushrooms. We've just had a terribly dry year in the Southern Rockies this year.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
That's when I usually find them too. At least that's when I know they're happening. So I'm out
Yeah.
looking for porcini or chanterelles.
Yeah, we looked
exactly.
out. What was that last weekend?
2 weekends ago.
Two
Yeah.
weekends ago, we hopped up on top of this little hill for some chanterelles, and there was a bunch of big old huckleberries sitting there.
Yeah.
It was nice.
I think for us in Montana here, I usually find them between like the 5,000 to 6,000 feet of elevation, but I found them even higher and up higher. They usually don't tend to really pop off for us here until like September, but it really just depends on the microclimate. It is a challenge foraging in the mountains sometimes, right? So you have all these microclimates and elevations to deal with. When I lived in Wisconsin, that wasn't really an issue as much.
Yeah, they're definitely earlier. So when I'm saying middle elevations in Colorado, I'm talking like 7,500 feet, and then I also get the higher elevation ones, which would be like 11,000 feet in early September usually. But I found some around that elevation more recently. So
Yeah.
Mm.
You just kind of have to scout and find your spots. And then, like you said, make sure you have several spots because they might not produce every year.
Yeah.
So I just want to blend in a quick comment from Mike here. He said, I've seen dandelions gone to seed with a head the size of my fist. That's insane. That's
That is
huge.
crazy.
That's almost like salsify
Yeah.
size.
I had
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
thought.
So are there any lookalikes that beginners should be careful of with huckleberries? I get that question a lot, and I'm just curious to see like what comes to mind for you.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, and you had mentioned Oregon grape, that some people think Oregon grape looks a bit like huckleberries. And to me, I mean, I could see, because Oregon grape can get a powder blue or powder purple berry, but of course the leaves are very different. They're holly-like, they're sharp tipped. So quite different. Huckleberry leaves, generally speaking, are mostly elliptic with little tiny serrations around the margins. But the berries really stand out because huckleberries and blueberries have that round stamp at the end of the berry. Now, the
Right.
commercial blueberries will have commercial blueberries will have a crown on it. And some of our huckleberries have crowns, but they fall off early. But they still have a round stamp at the end. And you're showing a post of mine with Oregon grape on it. That just has a black dot at the tip of the berry. So very, very different looking berry. And yeah, there are the leaves that look kind of like holly with the sharp tipped lobes or teeth around the margin.
Right. And they're also very low growing. Not to say that there can't be huckleberries that are low growing, but they're definitely different. But this is one I always hear people talk of. They always ask me like, "Oh, are those, when we're out hunting or something, are those the huckleberries?" No, no, those are the Oregon grapes. But Oregon grapes, to just quickly touch on them, I think I've like eaten them here and there. I've read very mixed things in books, but you've used them before for food, right?
Yeah, definitely. If I find a good patch of Oregon grapes, I'll collect those, and they're very strongly sour, so they do lend themselves well to be sweetened. So I usually cook them down with a little bit of water and make a juice out of them. I
Yeah.
usually just do. I've made wine out of them. That was pretty good.
Mm.
Ooh, they're very tart, and I want to try that. And I remember actually I was diving into the comments on your article, and someone had made the point that potentially if you have liver issues, you should be careful with them.
Yeah, sorry. I wish I had looked at. I when I got that comment, I did research that, and I can't remember what I concluded. I have it in my chapter draft for this. I'm working on a book, so I have it.
Yeah.
I could look it up if you want, but
Oh, it's all good. I think it's just something to call out. Maybe,
Hmm.
there are potentially some issues. I mean, it's like any other wild food. Just
Yeah.
try a little bit, see how you feel. And yeah, the Oregon grapes, maybe if there are potentially concerns, just be a bit careful, I guess,
Yeah.
yeah,
on that
I think I
aspect.
concluded that I'm not too concerned unless you have a pre-existing liver condition or are taking it medicinally. But again, I'd want to double
Yeah,
check.
I went in and I like followed that link the guy had, I think, in the comments, and it didn't seem like the most, trustworthy website to me, but I don't know, maybe it's just the way it was laid out and all. But something to research more, you know.
I do rely very much on scientific papers for my research. And so, if there's been a case of poisoning, I will find it, but I don't recall finding one for Oregon grape. I did want to
Yeah.
mention too, service berries look a lot like blueberries hanging from a tree, but I'm not concerned about it because they are delicious and edible.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
I love
Yeah.
service berries.
That's one we always like get after, and we have
Yeah.
a video already on the channel where we go forage for them. We have a video where we turn them into dehydrated patties, how the Native Americans do it,
Yeah.
and then we just recorded another one this year. They're just a staple for us for sure. And yeah, you even if you do somehow mess those up, it's not going to be an issue.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
going tomorrow for service berries.
Oh,
nice. I
nice.
should check again. Because we each got like 2 gallons, I think, but usually
Yeah.
we'll get like try to get like a 5 gallon bucket each and just process the service berries in all
Yeah.
different ways.
Thankfully, this year we actually picked clean
Yeah,
for the first time.
yeah.
Usually we're just
We're
picking, and
trying to be
it's a
better
whole
with
lot of.
picking our stuff clean so
Yeah.
that less processing work.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, I've been subscribed to your newsletter for a while, and one topic, if unless this is a false memory, you let me know. But like one topic that recently came up was tumbleweeds, and that really blew my mind because I'd never like did never really been on my radar. You know, besides like wild mustards, I know there's a wild mustard that's a tumbleweed. But you talk about some other species, so I'd love to pick your brain on those a little bit.
Oh
From
yeah,
from
it's yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, from your experience, like which species are actually edible and what parts of the plants do you like to go after?
Right. So yeah. So just to back up a second because a lot of uh, there's a number of different plants that you would call a tumbleweed. A tumbleweed is just a plant that grows into a roundish form and then breaks off at a certain point, tumbles on the wind to disperse its seeds. So any of those could be called tumbleweeds. And but in the wild food literature or just people in general, when they talk about eating tumbleweed, they are usually talking about just one species, and they've just used the name tumbleweed to refer to that one species. So that one, which is the one I would start with, is called Russian thistle also. And so it's a tumbleweed that it makes a prickly tumbleweed.
Mm.
But when it's young, before the spines firm up, it has kind of the foliage are like juicy tubes of grass. They're like 2 millimeters wide, and they're very nice. You know, the shoots and also the branch tips are nice boiled.
Yeah, let me pull up a picture because I think that is the salsa genus, right? Salsa. I'm saying it wrong.
Salsola.
Salsola genus, and I believe it's the one I'm showing here right now, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So here's another picture people can kind of see, and after seeing your article newsletter, I mean, they're everywhere
Hmm.
around here.
Yeah. Oh, so you've seen them.
Yeah, I gave him actually after I read your article, I went out right away and I had to go find him. And I found him, gave him a try, just a little nibble here and there, and they were interested. They were good. I liked
Did you
them.
try it raw?
I tried them raw, yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're markedly better cooked. But yeah, so yeah, there are a number of different plants in the genus Salsola. There are two species that I commonly eat, and one is a lot better than the other. And I can get into that if you'd like. But I'm inspired by world cuisine again with Salsola or Russian thistle. I found there's a related species that people call agretti. It's Salsola soda, and that's used in Italy in the peasant cuisine. It tossed, boiled or steamed, and then tossed with uh, lemon and olive oil. Yeah, and then, but I was really inspired by in Japanese cuisine another species, Salsola komarovi, is referred to as land seaweed. And so
Ooh,
I tried to replicate a dressing with, like a sweet sesame dressing on the cooked salsola shoots, and it's just so delicious. I really like it. It is like land seaweed.
and
Mm.
if I think I looked it up, and I think those grow not just in the West, those also grow out east, right? A
Right.
lot of
So,
these
and we don't have,
tumbleweeds.
yeah, those two species that I just mentioned, like the Salsola soda and Komarovi, those are mostly not in the US. Salsola soda is apparently invading some levees around San Francisco Bay. But other than that, you don't find that one in the wild. But the ones that I eat, Salsola tragus, it used to be called Salsola kali. Um, that one is quite widespread. It's concentrated in the West, but you can find it in the East and in the upper Midwest, especially like along railroad tracks, which of course is not a great place to forage. And or in cities, or you might find the actual Salsola kali on beaches on the whole eastern seaboard also.
So for
Um,
people listening right now and watching, it's not just something tumbleweeds that you can get in the West. You can also try and find them out east or maybe even in the Midwest.
Hmm.
And actually, I think I might have read this in your article too, that the iconic tumbleweed, it is this symbol of the West, but it is a lot of them are invasive, like you kind of like just mentioned,
Yeah,
which
so
is kind of a fun fact.
you mentioned tumble mustard, which is another tumbleweed that makes edible greens that you talked about with Orion from Forage, Colorado on one of your podcasts. And so tumble mustard, Russian thistle, and a third one we haven't gotten to, Kochia, all three of those, which are the major tumbleweeds we'll find nowadays, they're all non-native introductions, but they just do well, especially in the West, which is similar to like the Russian steppe. So it has similar habitats that have just done really well here after being introduced.
So you said Kochia, and we saw that you made something called land caviar from Kochia seeds. I would love to hear what that is, but to start, what is Kochia and where kind of can we find it?
Sure. So if we're thinking of the edible tumbleweeds as being three of them, that's the third, right? And so Kochia it's a pretty nondescript gray-green plant in the amaranth family, related to, spinach and amaranth, and has long, slender green leaves that are hairy, simple leaves. And it also branches into a big tumbleweed. And the tumbleweed that Kochia makes is not spiny. So it's a good way to tell it from the Russian thistle, which has the name thistle because it's spiny. So the Kochia is a non-spiny tumbleweed. So is tumble mustard for that matter. But yeah, it's Kochia, you can eat the greens. They're a little fuzzy, but I still like them okay. It's in a salad. Or I read about this interesting use in China where the shoots and the branch tips are moistened, tossed in flour and steamed to make a sort of noodle, a Kochia noodle. I thought, what a great way to mask that hairiness.
Yeah.
Kochia is really widespread in parts of the West. And you really want to get it after a rain. You don't want to get like super drought stricken plants. They're just not as good. But I like it best for the seeds, which is what you mentioned. And so that was another use I sleuthed from Japan, where it is used as it's called land caviar. And so when you process the seeds, they swell up and they get this crunch like caviar. And so this is done traditionally in one region of Japan, and used in like Buddhist vegan cuisine. So yeah, you can, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Just want to pull up because you've got great pictures of it in here.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been experimenting with this for a while. And so, yeah, I do like to brine the finished seeds so that they have kind of a caviar-like taste. So I'll usually put tamari, or I'll blend up some nori seaweed sheets and mix it in. And then something sweet like mirin or, sugar. But yeah, you can see in the pictures that you're showing these big tumbleweeds that you have to be able to use the seeds. You have to be able to recognize it in its dried out state, because that's when you would gather the seeds.
So best probably to find them while they're still growing. Mark your spot, come back and watch them kind of turn into that state. Yeah.
Sure. Although there's a way, if you're trying to identify Kochia in order to get the seeds from a field of tumbleweeds, after they've dried out, and usually the three tumbleweeds will grow together, or at least two of the three will grow together. So if you're trying to identify the dried out Kochia plant, it's definitely possible. It's going to be non-spiny, so that rules out Russian thistle. And it's not going to have long, skinny seed pods that look like micro branches. That's tumble mustard. Then, okay, you've narrowed it down. You think you have it. So you strip some of the seeds and the chaff from the branches. And what remains behind, the branch that remains behind, is white and cottony and soft. It's a unique identifying trait. So now, if you get that white cottony soft branch. It's either Kochia, or if you live in the Great Basin, it might be five horn. Let me see. What do they call it? They call it five hook bassia or five horn smotherweed. That plant looks very much like Kochia, especially in the young stages. It also leaves the cottony branch tip. It's closely related. It's it's very closely related. How do you know you have the five hook bassia? Well, when you look at the seeds that are in your hand, or the little fruits, really, if they have five hooks on them that stick to your clothing, then it's five hook bassia and it's not Kochia. But I have also made the caviar with five hook bassia, and no problem there. Just the seeds are smaller, a little more annoying.
Yeah, well, that's good to know that it's not like a dangerous lookalike,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
That makes
it's funny
sense.
because researching that, and that has been kind of an obsession of both mine and Sam Thayer's. You know, I finally did end up testing it on myself. There are some plants that, you know, if I can't find the information, but I can make an educated guess that they're probably safe, that I'll test on myself. And that was one of them.
Yeah, and if anybody actually wants to get like deep into the process, they can check out your article on it, because I think you lay it out step for step there on how to make that caviar. So I definitely want to try that out. And do you know, is that species, the Kochia, is that also found out east and Midwest?
It kind of has a similar habitat preference in the Northeast, or in the East, and in the upper Midwest. Again, that's one that I've seen it in cities. I've seen it on highway margins, and it's probably along the railroad tracks too. So, yeah, I think where you look for the prickly one, you look for this one as well. And I will just say about the seeds, it's a little different than processing lamb's quarter seeds. With Kochia seeds, you actually, after you clean them, you boil them and then soak them, and that gets them to swell up. And then the other thing I'll say is, I suspect they're high in saponins, because if you don't rub the soaked seeds and rinse them a bunch of times, it can make a little bit of a scratchiness in the throat, like nothing major, like you've been talking a lot, you know.
Yeah.
That effect is minimized if you clean them well, and if you serve them with other foods as opposed to just eating a bowl of them.
Right. And
Gotcha.
that learning from your lamb's quarters class, that is the saponins, and you can rinse it several times, and it'll actually foam like soap, because it's the same chemical that's in soap, right? And
Yeah. Hmm.
a lot of plants have it. A lot of even, I think, even like domesticated plants like quinoa, right? You're supposed to do the same thing, because that also has the saponins in them.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. And it is, you know, quinoa is pre-washed before it comes to us, and we're still supposed to rinse it. And some people are still sensitive to the saponins in quinoa. But I mean, we have industrial processes to wash it at this point. It'd be fun
Yeah.
Yeah.
to do that with Kochia, you
So you
know.
just kind of wash it until it's kind of doesn't foam anymore. Is that usually when you end?
I look for two things. I've run this experiment so many times because I want to give readers good advice. So I have found that you're rubbing, and then you're rinsing, and then you fill your bowl with water. And if there's suds, you're right. You want to keep doing it until there's less to no suds. But the other thing you're doing is, each time you fill the bowl of water, you carefully decant or pour off the little seed coats that separate from the from the Kochia seeds, from the grains. So I think it's two things. I think it's losing a bunch of those seed coats, and, you know, trying to wash until you don't have soapy water.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. And actually, Mike here just said that there's a plant in my area like yucca. They sometimes call it soap root for that reason. So yeah,
Oh, I think I've watched videos on that before.
have you? That's cool.
Hmm. I know you can use like sage and stuff too. My uncle used to do that, and lavender and all sorts of crazy backpacking tricks.
Like as a soap, you say?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, you take it and rub and get clean.
So let me actually pull up one of your video clips here to kind of close off the tumbleweed segment, because it kind of goes over to Kochia, and I think it also shows that noodle dish from China in there, if I remember correctly. And bear with me, I don't think I've ever shared a clip on here, but we're going to try it out here. So 1 second. So you got to make sure it actually shares the audio. Let me know, Erica, if this audio is coming through too loud. I'll try to turn it down right away. Chat, if it's coming through too loud, let me know here.
Okay.
All right, let's see. You guys can see that. Okay, let's pull that up quick. Make sure, yeah.
So there's an elephant in the room, and it's this non-native species called Kochia that is all over the West. Is it edible? It sure is, and it's related to spinach. Kochia loves to grow in full sun. Pretty nondescript, but very common, often found in large populations. Kochia is a hairy herb. It usually has 3 major veins on the underside of the leaf. You might think, who wants to eat a hairy vegetable? But I'm actually kind of surprised that it's not bad raw. Mild and juicy. Of course, it is best to get the Kochia under good growing conditions with lots of rain. If there's been a lot of drought, it ends up being kind of dry. My favorite use of Kochia is dampened, floured, and steamed. It makes kind of a Kochia noodle. This is a traditional use for this plant in China. So there's an elephant in the room.
Cool. So that was, I just thought, a really great summary of some of the things you just said, and also showed some great videos of the plant in its younger stages. And then of course that dish at the end, the noodles. I really want to try that. I gotta
Yeah,
check
that would be
that
so
out.
fun.
Yeah, to me, it like saves a fuzzy green. You know, is it amazing? You have to let me know what you think. But yeah.
So, are there any toxic lookalikes for people to be aware of with tumbleweed?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, let me stick to the Russian thistle and the Kochia, but let's start with the Kochia because we've just been talking about it. So, as far as Kochia, yeah, I honestly can't think of any toxic lookalikes. There was the 5-hook bassia we talked about, which turns out to be also edible. And then there's a plant called Russian pigweed that's found, like it's found in our high elevation mountain parks and in my backyard. It looks quite a bit like Kochia, but you know, the leaves are scratchy. And it's also edible if you like eating sandpaper, you know.
So that's a good
So,
test.
I would say for Kochia, I can't think of a toxic lookalike, and I have been racking my brain because that's, as I work on this book, that's something I want to be able to provide is toxic lookalikes, if there are any. And then as far as, you know, rewinding to the Russian thistle, so that's the land seaweed that makes the prickly tumbleweed. So Russian thistle does somewhat resemble another Western weed common in the Great Basin called halogeton. Halogeton, however, is shorter, and the leaves are even more succulent. They're a little fatter. They're like little sausage-shaped leaves, and it doesn't get prickly. And the young plants have bright red branches. So halogeton, you know, these are salt-loving plants. The Russian thistle is, halogeton is, so you find them in the similar places. Now, halogeton can be toxic to sheep if overgrazed, but a lot of people assume it's poisonous. And that's another one that honestly, we really don't actually know if it's poisonous to humans. I found that in Andalusia, there's a tradition of pickling the stems of their local halogeton species and eating it. So my suspicion is our local halogeton is non-toxic. I mean, it's high in oxalates. That's why it's toxic to sheep if they eat a ton of it, right? So, and we don't want to overdo oxalates, but if you boil plants that have oxalates in them, you can reduce the oxalate content significantly. And that includes lamb's quarters, and that includes Russian thistle, that includes Kochia, spinach, exactly, rhubarb, coffee, tea, chaga mushrooms.
Almond butter. I just found out not on a podcast a few months
yeah,
back.
I know some people are like, I need an oxalate-free diet. I am not scared of oxalates, eaten in the context of a healthy diet, in the context of a diverse diet. But anyway, so Russian thistle looks a bit like halogeton. Again, to summarize, halogeton is shorter, has bright red branches at the stage at which one would be gathering. It doesn't get spiny, it's kind of fat leaves, and probably not going to hurt you anyway.
Cool. All right. Pivoting into another one we wanted to talk with you about is it's the ground cherry. And I also have a clip from you. I want to play just the first few seconds of it, just kind of a little intro so people get an idea of what it looks like. Let's find that. And again, like I said, tell me if it's too loud or what. Let's make sure people can see that. All right. I'm just going to play the first few seconds.
If there's one plant that can distract me from an early morning photography mission, it's wild tomatillo. Also called ground cherries.
All right, that's all I'm going to play because I don't want to reveal too much.
I know I kind of repeated everything in that last video, but I appreciate you playing it.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I think it gives people, a nice image, especially for people watching right now. And it does look like the tomatillo. So for people who haven't foraged them before, what exactly is a ground cherry and what makes them worth seeking out in the wild, in your opinion?
Sure. So, just like we cultivate tomatillos and we also cultivate ground cherries, but ground cherries are basically small tomatillos that have marble-sized berries, and they grow in an inflated lantern-like husk, a dangling lantern. With tomatillos, they fill out the husk, but with the ground cherries, they don't. They kind of hang inside it. I think that's actually a good summary of what, I'm calling them wild tomatillos. I got that from a friend of mine, Kelly Kinsher, who is an ethnobotanist at the University of Kansas, who's been studying a species of wild ground cherry for its cancer fighting and cancer preventative actions. And he likes to call them wild tomatillos. And I kind of like that. When people think of ground cherries, they might think of golden berries that you can buy at the grocery store, but they've already been separated from their husks. And so they're like gold colored and they're sweet and they're like cherries, I guess, but they go through stages of ripening. So they're going to be green first. And even tomatillos do this. You can buy green tomatillos, but if you let them sit on the counter, they're going to gradually turn yellowish, or some of them are purple. But, so they start out greener, they're edible when they're green, and then they turn more yellowish. I'm talking about our cultivated tomatillos. So I have the same, I think of most of our ground cherries as working the same way.
Yeah, so actually, I think you have some pictures you gave me. So here's kind of some of them in a bit of a later stage, green, kind of turning, at least the husk already kind of turning a little yellowish. And we found them for the first time last year, and we're very impressed with them. And actually, Mike said that he's excited for this one and proffered methods of consuming. Found these in abundance here. Heck yeah, Mike, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I've yet to find them in abundance, and I am curious, like, what are the best spots to kind of try to find these, these ground cherries?
Yeah, so the various wild ground cherries, and I'm most familiar with those in the West. So I'm going to speak to those primarily. Where I find them is disturbed. Well, I find them in grasslands. I find them along irrigation ditches. Bike paths in the Denver area, which go through the prairie, find them in those locations too. So usually at lower elevations. That in Colorado is like 5,000 or 6,000 feet, maybe up to about 7,500 feet. But they do well in agricultural zones. I have friends from Mexico who call them tomate de milpa, which is like the cornfield tomatillo. And so they would have them growing in abundance in their cornfields. So definitely there's something about them growing in an agricultural context, but you can also find them just out in the open prairie too.
And I wonder how much of that is like, plants that people at one point farmed, because people farmed them and then, they kind of escaped into the wild and that's probably one reason you find them in that agricultural context still today.
Definitely.
It is suspected that they have been tended over the many years by indigenous peoples in the Southwest in particular. Because you think about tomatillos, they're from Mexico and north through our desert Southwest into our prairies.
Yeah. And actually, Mike, in the chat, I'd be curious what kind of locations you find your species in. It's probably very similar. He said, oh, he already put it in there. Unkept portions of my garden and yard were key spots for me.
Great minds think alike,
great
Mike.
minds think alike. Yeah, and I don't know if I think we touched on, but they taste amazing when they're ripe. Like it was probably not gonna lie, like one of my favorite wild fruits I've eaten yet.
Yep.
Did you eat yellow ones?
Yeah, golden.
Yeah,
ones,
okay. Cool.
So how are you telling which fruits are ripe, and are the unripe fruits toxic at all?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I think is a big myth in foraging circles, that you can't eat the green ones, they're poisonous, and you can't eat them unless the husks are brown, otherwise they're poisonous. I mean, it does confuse a forager. Like you saw that picture that I had collected ones with green husks, one with tan husks. And are you supposed to sit there and be like, this one's a little too green, it might poison me? And, I've had this doubt for the longest time, because the first times I ate these, I was eating green ones and they were delicious, like acidic and sweet, like a tomatillo. And then they turn yellow, more yellow, and then they get even sweeter, like more like a cherry. But I was eating these green ones, and someone was like, those are poisonous. I'm like, well, it hasn't hurt me. So let's think about this a little bit. When we eat store-bought tomatillos, we eat them green. They are close relatives, and in fact, probably were selected from wild varieties. So why should the wild ones be poisonous when they're green? And so I actually, this is going to be a chapter in my book, and one that I think is important because it hasn't been covered very much in depth in the wild food literature. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to get to the bottom of this. So this is what I've done. First of all, I identified as many species as I could near me. So I'm up to 5, not counting store-bought tomatillos. And then for each of the ones that I identified, I tasted the green ones. I tasted green ones in late summer and fall, which is when they've gotten to maximum size and they're really starting to ripen, right? And they all tasted like good tomatillos, all 5 species, So then I also ate some green ones in early summer when they were underripe, when they hadn't reached maximum size. Because I was wondering, are they going to burn my mouth the same way that you would expect if they were high in solanine or chaconine or some of the other nightshade compounds? Those usually warn our taste buds with a burning sensation or extreme bitterness or hotness. So I tried those early summer ones. I thought, are these toxic? Are they going to give me an ill effect? No, they did not. They tasted bland. I wouldn't collect them, but they didn't taste, one of my rules of thumb is it has to taste good,
Right.
So yeah, I thought, okay, then I poured through the literature and I could not find a single case of poisoning by ground cherry, Physalis species. I couldn't find a single case, not by the berries. Whether they were green or whether they had already turned yellow or in some cases purple, I couldn't find a single case of poisoning anywhere. So I just think it's kind of counterproductive to think of the green ones as poisonous, because then you're really stuck about what can I pick and what can I pick. So right. I think people are splitting hairs. I don't think it's necessary. If you wait till they turn yellow, they're going to be more delicious, but the bugs might get to them first. If I'm going out on a mission, I'm going to pick, I'll taste them, if they taste good, I'm going to pick it. I do want to say people might be worried about quantity. Okay, can you OD on these green tomatillos or green ground cherries. And so this is one of my other tests. Though I ate 40 of the longleaf ground cherries. That's the species I get most often. Yeah, 840 in a row. I'm like, okay. And I didn't have an issue. And I did that multiple times with raw ones, with cooked ones. I do think you want to eat them as in normal quantities as part of a balanced diet. I mean, on an empty stomach, I could see them upsetting your stomach, but I didn't have any issues. Yeah. And so, you know, I do want to qualify this and say, I have only eaten 5 species. There are 20 in the green state. I only did these tests with 5 species. There are 25 to 30 species in the US.
Yeah, we know of, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, the taxonomy is in flux. So it can be hard to get to species level with your identifications. Like some of the species are more clearly defined than others. But all of the ones that I've eaten are perennials. The perennials supposedly tend to taste better. And they have, the lanterns have 10 prominent ridges coming down them. Most of the annuals have, I want to say 5 or 6 prominent ridges coming down them. I think it's 5. And so I haven't spent as much time with the annuals. So there may be species in the South or the desert Southwest that are actually acrid, burning when you eat them. I've eaten 1 or 2 that were slightly acrid, you know. So here's the rules of thumb I propose. Sample your ground cherries late in the season, in late summer and fall. Don't get them when they're underripe. Whether they're green or they're some other color, sample them late in the season. If they are distasteful, overly bitter, overly hot, or burn the mouth, don't eat them. Yeah. But I think if they're sweet or they taste like tomatillos, in my experience to date, those are edible.
Wow. Awesome.
You know?
Have you had any luck with kind of ripening them off the vine, kind of like a tomato?
Yeah, people say you can't do it. So if you want to try to ripen them off the vine, well, you're going to leave them in the husks. They ripen better in the husks. But those green husks, in my experience, don't tend to turn yellow. And the berries might... I've waited and waited and waited for them to ripen. And I haven't gotten the berries to go from green to gold. What happens is they start to dry and they might take on little hints of gold if you've got one that turns to gold. So then at that point, I'm just like, well, I better either use it or just assume I'm going to eat it as a dried fruit. So I would say they don't ripen well, but they ripen somewhat.
And you can kind of collect them into later months, right? I think the ones last year we got, there was already a little snow on the ground.
Yeah, I think so. I tend to go around the same time. They're not close to me. I live at 10,000 feet in the mountains, so I have to go down to the prairie to find them. So I'll go in August, September. But yeah, I guess I've gotten them in October. You know, and then when you're collecting them, sometimes the bugs have already gotten to them. Sometimes it's just an empty husk. So I usually just squeeze them a little bit and see if there's a berry inside. And sometimes one plant will have them, one plant won't.
Yeah, we got excited last year when we didn't find them, and then we had, we're picking these husks and they were empty, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. Do you know what species you got? Can you recall what the leaves looked like? I'll say this because I collect. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say that they were very low growing on the ground. Yeah.
And then, so if they were very low growing, they probably weren't the species that I normally collect. I normally collect one called longleaf ground cherry, which has long leaves. And it gets fairly tall, like to lower thigh height.
Is that the one you shared a picture of? I can pull that up quick. This one?
I think so. Yep. Yeah, that's longleaf ground cherry. Yep. And so it can have this mounding habit, and it's a very productive plant. So it's the one that I like because it makes a lot of fruit. But I wonder if the one you found would have to check the range, because now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure. There's one called clammy ground cherry, but I think that's mostly found from the eastern slope of the Rockies. And then east, that's a real low one, has broad leaves, and the leaves are sticky. The longleaf ground cherry, narrow leaves, narrow-ish leaves, and usually not hairy or mostly not hairy. So there are a lot of different species out there, but I'd have to look at what's in Montana to see maybe
I'm trying
what
to
you
see here real
found.
quick if I have the pictures readily available. Actually, let's see. Mm, yeah, I think I have it sadly on my other backup device right now. Oh, actually, we got something here.
Well, I mean, you could put it up and I might not know it because come to think of it,
Yeah.
like I don't think any of the ones that I've been looking at are in Montana, but I'd have to double check.
Yeah, I
You
have
found
a
them in
video.
Montana though, right?
Yeah, Montana.
Yeah,
I mean,
Eastern, yeah.
Eastern Montana, so definitely more like plains
Yeah, sure.
country, like juniper trees, and maybe kind of we're kind of by a river bottom, but not really. We're kind of in a drainage.
Like Little Creek Bottom is down
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Well,
mean,
And it's like it's surrounded by ag land, but it's not that the piece that we were actually on was in a preserve for a long, long time. So
cool. Okay. Well, all of them are native, except for if you've ever seen the plant with the red lanterns. Have you ever seen that? Pictures
I
of
think
that?
so.
Some people
you
call
know
it
what the
Chinese
species
lantern.
name is?
Yeah,
Can you look it up?
Physalis alkakengi. Good luck with that one. ALKE.
Thank God for Google. It's already pulling it up for me.
Physalis.
whoa.
Oh,
This
but
is-
they've renamed it. They've moved it out of Physalis. So, but you should probably be able to find it under there. So
Yeah, I have it here on iNaturalist. Let me know if this is the one. Let me just pull it up quick. It's kind of cool looking. If that's the
it's
one.
awesome looking. I love it. Yeah. So that's our only non-native, and it's actually not even in the genus Physalis anymore. And you can find that escaped from cultivation in parts of the Northeast.
Interesting.
It is an interesting one because people tell you that makes actually like bright red berries, and people tell you those are poisonous. And then you look abroad, and people are using it medicinally in a lot of areas of the world, and people are eating it. A friend of mine ate some of those berries, and he said, "Well, on the same plant, some were sweet and good, and some were acrid." I was like, "Oh, it's interesting," So I tried to grow it, and it just failed out here. I really want to learn more about that plant, so I can't widespread advocate eating that one. But
Yeah.
but I think all of the ground cherries, as long as it has a husk, right, are worth a try. But again, with those rules of thumb that I said, because if it is acrid, you're not going to want to be putting that burning stuff down your throat.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Special people might.
and
Don't do it.
the other parts of the plants though you don't want to eat, right?
Yeah,
really just want the berry.
Right. So the foliage is not known to be edible, considered not edible, except for like the 6 or so ethnobotanical records I was able to pull up around the world of people eating the leaves. So I did find the only poisoning I found, the only poisoning, documented poisoning that I found regarding ground cherries was actually from eating the leaves.
Okay.
So, but they are also, it seems they are also eaten in some areas of the world. And then you can also buy a tea made with them that's supposed to be anti-cancer. It's called Siplican tea in Philippines. So what my advice to foragers would be is that let's consider these leaves inedible until we can learn more. But some signs point to some uses. The poisoning case, they ate the leaves fresh. So they might have been higher in toxic compounds. I think all the ethnobotanical reports I found were from cooked leaves. But again, this is me pushing the boundaries, I think, a little bit. I would recommend people don't consume other parts of the plant until we know more.
Cool. Yeah, Mike said Lindy got me. I like spicy.
I could feel it, Mike.
Cool. So let me see if I had any more questions about the Physalis. I think that's it, really. I mean, we covered that really in great detail, and thank you so much for all your detailed answers. It's been awesome so far.
Awesome.
So,
Oh yeah, are you going on to a new topic?
yeah, I was gonna, but if you have more to share about them, go ahead. I'd
No,
love to hear more.
I wanted to read you my conclusion about the liver.
Yeah.
I just opened up my chapter draft
for
on
the
Oregon
Oregon
grape, the
grapes.
Oregon grape. So, like going back a little bit, do you mind? This is
No,
what
not
I
at all.
put for my caution. Berberine and other medicinal compounds concentrated in the roots and the stems can stimulate the uterus, interact with medications, and inflame a compromised liver. But the berries are a well-documented food with no reports of toxicity.
Okay.
That said, a reader once told me his liver enzymes rose after eating a lot of them. So if the liver is a concern, you may wish to eat sparingly just in case.
Great.
And
That's
with
yeah.
the uterus, maybe for pregnant ladies too.
Yeah.
Not the move.
But that's the berberin and compounds in the roots and the stems.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
people take berberine as a supplement too, though. I
Yeah.
know about that. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So but you're right. I mean, if you wanted to be extra safe and you were expecting, I mean, you probably maybe might want to avoid the berries, even though that effect has been documented with the roots and the stems, because they are Oregon grape is a awesome, super medicinal plant.
It's everywhere out here.
Yeah.
It's like it's almost like you can find it, or you
You
cannot
can't
not
not
find it.
Yeah.
If you go into the mountains,
Yeah,
especially during September elk season.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Like those bright yellow roots, if you dig up some root and you scrape it, they're bright yellow. That's the berberine in them. And they are broadly antimicrobial. So I've heard of somebody using a tincture of Oregon grape root against strep and having success. This is totally anecdotal, of course. I didn't do a study, but when my husband had a knee surgery, it developed an infection. It was this raised, angry, red bump on his knee. And it was the weekend. I thought, well, I'm just going to start giving him tinctured Oregon grape root, a couple dropperfuls a day. And I don't know if it was that, but that infection just went down, down, down and disappeared. I'm like, okay, we'll try that again. And also foraging author Tom Elpel, who is, I think, in Montana too.
Yeah, we just took a class with him not too long ago.
Oh, good. He's great, isn't he?
Awesome. Awesome guy.
Yeah, but in his book that he wrote with, I think it's Thomas
Foraging
Reed.
the Mountain West.
Yeah, he talks about being on a backpacking trip or a wilderness trip for, several weeks and getting an infection on the finger and then soaking it in a tea of Oregon grape root every night and not having to leave the backcountry, healing that infection. So good one to know for emergency backcountry medicine, for sure.
Hunters out there listening right now, if you're on that multi-day hunting trip, might want to, and you get hurt, maybe to try out the Oregon grape roots. It's good to know.
Right, especially if an infection seems to be threatening, I think it's worth a try.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've taught in person and online foraging for years. What are some of the most common misconceptions you see beginners bring to wild foods?
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I guess maybe the biggest misconception that I get is some people expect to come to class and they expect to experience a banquet of plentiful wild food everywhere. And, lots and lots to forage. And I know this is the case in some places, but it doesn't really describe the Intermountain West very well. And this is actually something Sam Thayer likes to point out to me, or has pointed out to me in the past, is that there is a reason that the pre-Columbian indigenous population of the Intermountain West was lower than other regions. There were more indigenous peoples, at contact time. There were more indigenous peoples living in the eastern woodlands, in the upper Midwest, in coastal California, in the Pacific Northwest, But here in the Intermountain West, we had lower populations because there just wasn't as much food to sustain people. So, like our stinging nettle patches are sporadic and sometimes small, but you go to Pennsylvania and you've got acres and acres and acres of the stuff. So I like to say this makes us better foragers. We have to work at it,
More resilient foragers.
Yeah,
Right.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I shouldn't say better foragers, but yeah, we do have to work at it. So you have to learn what you can get and when. Yeah.
So let me ask you this, like what is maybe a 1 or 2 top foraging tips you have for beginner foragers?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like to say to learn plants one by one. I mean, people come to my class, we talk about 30 different plants, but I think if they can walk away with 1 or 2 that they can identify, that they can then go experiment with and see how they like it in the kitchen. My husband is my big test case. Will he eat the thing that I made out of the foraged food? Can that
I
be
love
a
that.
staple in our household? One plant is great boiled and another isn't. So yeah. Also just, safety, obviously you should not be eating anything that you cannot 100% identify and know that it's edible. It's funny because every couple of years I do some poison hemlock videos and then I get comments. I've had 2 different people say that they ate poison hemlock greens because they thought they looked like carrots.
Whoa.
So that the person who's going to poison themselves, and it's not common to poison yourself with a plant, more so with a mushroom, but the person who's going to poison themselves is the person who goes, I want to do foraging, and I'm not going to get a book. Let me walk out in nature. This looks edible. It's bright green. It looks like carrot greens. Let me eat that one. And, then they ate the poison hemlock. They didn't eat a lot.
Yeah.
Neither of them got hurt. But
That's
that
good.
gives me night sweats,
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
seriously.
don't eat the poison hemlocks or water hemlocks.
Or just anything that you're not sure.
Right,
So yeah,
exactly.
but it sounds like, as a beginner, figure out 1 or 2 species and maybe even some that could become staples and just focus on that. You don't need to go after every plant in the book. You can be a forager and just have a few things you go after every year.
Yeah, and then you build.
Exactly.
You build,
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, we didn't learn what we know at one time.
No.
Right,
Definitely
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Are there any new species that you've explored this year that you're getting excited about?
Yeah, I wouldn't say this year. I've been exploring. One of my obsessions is to figure out edible plants that people don't know that are not in the books. And so one plant that I'm obsessed with is a dandelion relative called rush skeleton weed. It's a non-native. It's Chondrilla junkia. And some European foraging books describe it as being good. But really nobody here in the States thinks of this as an edible. They don't know it as an edible. And so the leaves look like a dandelion. It has similar dandelion-like flowers, but it makes a stem like chicory. And then it has little red hairs at the base of the stem. So, it's actually highly invasive in Northwest Montana. So like if you are near there or go there, maybe you could find it in a ginormous population and tell me what you think. Because the only population I know of here, because it's further west, further northwest, and it's a real problem in Idaho and surrounding areas. But the only population I know about here is near Boulder, Colorado, in one specific park up in the foothills. And it's become a real problem. Like the land managers are really worried about it. They're trying to control it. And they said, I'm not allowed off trail to go study it. And so I really wanted to just go meet that plant, and it's right there. But they said, nope, you can't do it. And so I found some on the highway margin, which is the worst place to get food. But I did scrounge a little bit of it and taste it, and it was kind of bitter. So I just wonder if under better growing conditions it would be better. Maybe it would just be like another dandelion like plant to eat. But
yeah,
That's
So we're actually in Southwest Montana,
oh, you
but
are okay.
I really want to get up there to get into these huckleberry fields that people keep telling me about that I don't have down here. And you
Yeah.
know what? Maybe you need to come visit us so we can do that together. That'd be
Yeah,
really
Uh,
fun.
that
that'd
would
be
be
so fun.
so fun. I have found myself so busy with this book, but it would be better to learn more plants. But I mean, I've been working on it for 10 years, so it's kind of time to wrap it up. But part of me wants to spend another 10 years chasing
You can
plants
always do
before I
an
finish
addition,
it.
right?
But thank you for the invitation. I might take you up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's open. I think Orion said he's gonna come visit us. He
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
wants to
cool.
come forage some porcini with us up here. So checking quick the chat. And guys, if you have any more questions, we're gonna wrap it up soon. So let us know in the chat now. But Gerald said that I just picked my tomatillos yesterday. I have had the ground cherries mixed into my garden before.
Cool.
Cool. That is awesome. And Mike said that isn't there a third lookalike? And I think he was talking about wild carrots and
The poison
poison
hemlock.
hemlock. So we talked water hemlock, poison hemlock. What's another one that usually comes up?
Oh, the yarrow kinda.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, you can use yarrow medicinally.
Well, it looks kind of like
Queen's
it.
Anne's lace is the actual, is that the one, Queen's Anne's lace? Have you
Queen
heard?
Anne's lace.
Because
Let's.
that's not the wild carrot.
Is he talking about that though? Like,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was in regards to the
Yeah.
the parsnips and stuff.
okay, I think I have another poisonous carrot family plant documented in one of my chapters, but I can't
Well,
remember what it's called because it's not near me.
yeah, Queen's
Um,
Anne's lace, that's the edible wild carrot, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's the actual edible wild carrot. And
Although some people call poison hemlock Queen Anne's lace. You got to be
oh,
careful.
all right, that's good to know. Well,
Yeah.
I've honestly stayed away from that whole family until this year we started going after cow parsnips.
Yeah.
We got some videos online on YouTube about that one now, but yeah, I have to still explore that family a lot more. I'm more in the camp of if there's all these crazy dangerous lookalikes, is the reward really worth it? You know, I can buy carrots
Yeah.
in the store. Um, I mean, it is cool, but still, I do want to learn more about them though. I got
Yeah,
it.
I have a sense that a lot of the carrot family is more edible than people think, but people steer clear of, you know, carrot family plants with finely divided leaves that make white umbels, just because it's safer if you don't know what they are. But I think there's a number more that are edible. I'm kind of curious about that. I've been chasing that a little bit, but probably not fast enough to put into my book.
Yeah.
Mm.
So actually, Taste Match had a comment, and shout out to Byron and his Taste Match app. I don't know if you looked into that, Erica, but it's a really cool AI app that you
Mm-hmm.
like. You like select an ingredient, and it's going to recommend you all these other ingredients that go
Oh,
well and
With it.
flavors with your dish. So it's a great like app for
Pairing.
people who just want to
Yeah.
start cooking at home. But yeah, any cookbooks that cover these ingredients, there's a lot out there. I can rattle a few off, and then I'll let you go, or you go first. What comes to mind for you?
well, I don't do a ton of cooking by cookbook. I know
Me
that
too.
the author Carolyn Neathammer in the desert Southwest has some recipes on with the tumbleweed, you know, the Russian thistle. I haven't tried making those. You know, for the wild tomatillos or ground cherries, I just if they're green, I just follow tomatillo recipes. So I'll do like, you know, tomatillo salsa, cooked tomatillo salsa, or tomatillo soup or something like that. But yeah, I guess I don't have specific cookbook recommendations for the rest of these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so for me, definitely the sous chef,
Yeah.
his cookbook, and I think he just dropped another one.
Did he
Those are
already drop it?
I'm pretty sure
Okay.
he dropped another one.
The other one is supposed to be for all of the North American continent, I
Okay.
think. Yeah, so it's a lot broader than his first one.
Yeah. Then God, why am I blanking on her name? I've had her on the
Danielle Pruitt?
podcast. Thank you.
Yeah.
Danielle Pruitt's book, Wild and Whole, is really good.
That one's nice because it's seasonal. So
Yeah.
it has like breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert for spring, and then for summer, fall, and winter. So depending on what season that you're looking for a recipe, you just go to the winter section, and she'll kind of help give you some recommendations on what to do at that time.
Yeah. And there are other books I have, and I just can't think of them. But most foraging books will actually have some recipes in them, which is pretty cool.
Oh, I'd like to say one. It doesn't cover these ingredients specifically, but Foraging and Feasting by I don't know if you pronounce it Dinah or Dina Falcone. That's like a master recipe cookbook. So she'll tell you like, here's how you make a pesto, and then these are the wild greens that would be good for the flavorful herbs, and these are the wild greens that would be good for the base herbs. And so it's a master recipe book that I actually really like that book for devising recipes based on what I've managed to forage.
Yeah. And then, Alan Berger's book, I forget the name now, but he has a really good book about wild edible plants and cooking them. And then, of course, we try to, when we do our vlog foraging adventures, we try to include some sort of recipe in there, often out like from these books. So you can check out our vlog videos too on that end.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So Mike was saying yarrow, maybe what I was thinking of. I chased yarrow until I found it about a decade ago. Still raising them of those two cultivars I harvested from the wild. That is cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Cool.
That is actually a thing to do. You can go out and get seeds from wild plants and bring them into your garden, and select for maybe plants that seem to be growing really strong in the wild. They might have some better genetics and whatnot. I know Clay Bowers does that quite often. Awesome. Well, Erica, where can people follow you, find you? Where can they take your online classes? Let us know.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I blog at wildfoodgirl.com, and I have, you can find there links to my Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, I also, at that website, I have a series of web classes that I started doing because some of my readers on my email list were not in Colorado and couldn't come to classes in Colorado. So I do these hour-long, jam-packed with information and photos classes. So there's one on ground cherries and black nightshade, for example. And so those are, I deliver those live the first time, and then afterwards they're pre-recorded they're $20 each, but I have kind of a lot of them now. There's edible berries 1, edible berries 2, and Rocky Mountain mushrooms 1 and 2, edible weeds 1 and 2, pine nuts, wild onions, poisonous plants, like a lot of different topics. And so I also have a membership program for one price per year. You can get all of the videos and watch all of them. And I hope they'll be useful for people.
They definitely are. I've taken 2 now, and I really love them. So one was live, like I mentioned at the beginning. It's fun to be there live because you can ask all your questions. Yeah. B. Hendricks says life is beautiful. I agree, and that's a great place to end the podcast, I think.
Yeah.
So Erica, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone in the live chat, thank you so much for watching and leaving your questions and comments. We really appreciate that. Thanks, Mike, for being back again. He's always here with us.
Mike's the best.
Yeah.
What did he say?
Let's see what he said. He said, which is what I would suggest if she gets that roadside plant. The cool guest, I mean. The cool guest, I mean. I think he's trying to say you're a cool guest.
If you are, thanks, Mike.
But also, I think it might have been, I have just like some of the chat in front of me, so I don't know what it might be related to. It might have been a previous comment he made. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. And yeah, we'll be back with another episode at some point. Bye-bye.
Awesome.
Cool, thank you.
Bye.
Let me end the stream.